Heard introductions of Rashmi ma'am and Mr. Janak. I invite Rashmi ma'am to please start off with her presentation.
This is a presentation like I have been working for the past few years on public institutions of various kinds. And which, from the election commission to the frontline workers and district administration. And this is one thing that I did concerning secondary education, which focused more on the state and district level. So, next. So my contention is that public institutions shape policy formulation as well as the outcomes. And I will show how this happens in this particular secondary education thing. And basically, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work of Douglas North, a very well-known economist, and he says that institutions are a pre-commitment to policy. So we are looking at, this is the kind of background. Of course, he says it in the context of economic institutions, but I extend it to the concept of all public institutions. So the presentation that I'm making today is based on a field study. This was carried on in Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. I had other colleagues working. Some people were looking at quality, some people are looking at equity, and I was looking at the institutional structure and policy. This study was focused on secondary education because we felt that we do not know enough about secondary education. So in this, I studied 20 organizations at different levels in terms of their role, their structure, human resources, and processes. How do they work? And then one tried to get handle on what are the characteristics of these organizations, and then a little bit of understanding of how these characteristics impinge both on policy formulation and on the ultimate outcomes of a particular policy. Next. So basically, just as an introduction, in Rajasthan, you have an unusual secondary school structure for India. In, I think, something around 2014, they went in for major administrative reforms at the school level, where they set up integrated schools from class 1 to 12 in every gram panchayat. So, which is very, very unusual in our country. So they set up a really good access to secondary and higher secondary education. In Andhra Pradesh, the schooling structure for secondary education, you have certain kinds of schools from 6 to 10 classes, which are part of the school system. Then you have a separate department. You have classes 11 and 12 as intermediate colleges, which also exists in some other states. And then in both these states, you have open schools for people who have dropped out. So that is a kind of rough structure on the ground, and these open resource centers have, open schools have resource centers which they house in various kinds of higher secondary schools and high schools. So that is the kind of outreach we have. Now my focus is on the supporting and governing organizations. Now these exist in 5 fields. The administrative, that is the oldest structure, this inspector of schools, district education officer, that kind of thing. Then there is the academic structure, which is basically the SCRTs and diets. These came around the 70s. Then there are separate structures for programs. Okay, this started with DPP and then continued in SSA. Some states it was disbanded. So this happened in the 1990s. Then there are examination boards and open school board and open school. Okay, so this is the 5 streams in which we support and govern school. And in AP, this whole structure is separate for 11 and 12. It's separate for 9 and 10, and it's separate for 11. So this is if you look at what is happening look at the structure. I mean, this is a very basic structure. So where you see the red thing, so at the state level, in AP, you'll have a commissioner 1 to 10, commissioner 11 to 12. At the district level, you'll have a DO, District Education Officer 1 to 10, Vocation Officer for 11, 12, and a RIO, Inspection Officer for looking at private schools. And then at the subdivision level, you have a Deputy Education Officer only for 9 and 10. Okay? So what happens here is that for 11 and 12, you don't have an outreach at all below the district level. And a district has an average population of around 15 lakh or so. So you don't have anyone there. Then in Rajasthan, you have a better structure because of their administrative reforms. And right down to the mandal level, you have some kind of an outreach. Now, Rajasthan has separate program structures. AP has integrated its program structures into the administrative ones, with the result that for class 11 and 12, you don't have any program structure also. So you don't have, basically you don't conceive programmatic. There are certain. Then the most interesting thing is this, that in AP you have an SCRT for class 1 to 10, and you have for 11 to 12, all academic activities are being undertaken by the examination board. So there is no academic organization as such. Plus, below the district, the diets don't address secondary school, so that you have no academic support below the state level for secondary education. In Rajasthan, neither the SCRT nor the diets address secondary education. Textbooks are being made by the exam board. Teacher training is done by all these B.Ed colleges and all. So again, for secondary education, you have no support below the state level. So you have no academic outreach to secondary schools, period, in Rajasthan. If you look at the examination board, in AP, you have separate examination boards, and in Rajasthan, you have a single examination board, and they work through the district administrative offices. If you look at open school, in the district, in AP, you have an open school coordinator. In Rajasthan, you don't. So even the open school does not, in Rajasthan, go beyond the state level. So if you look at the fault lines, that if you look at the academic stream, there are very key structure itself, there are issues. And you have almost no support, academic support below the state level. And even at the state level, you don't have a coherent structure, because someone is making textbooks, someone is doing teacher training, someone is doing, so there is no kind of place where a vision develops. Next. Then what I've already said, that in AP, basically you don't have, administratively in AP, in class 11, 12, you don't have penetration below the district level. And you see, AP is one of those states which has a very interesting sub-administrative unit called the mandal, which is much smaller than the block, and which is a good unit because it's, in a smaller area, so you have, generally their administrative work is much better. But for secondary school, you have nothing there. So this is basically, and then in Rajasthan, you have a CMAT, which is for training academic administrators, and in AP, you don't. And no state has any kind of role of local government. Now, local governments can't do a lot in secondary education, but even if they whatever their motivation may be, I know in Kerala, for instance, where local governments are very empowered, they do a lot in school education. They organize trips for school children to various places. They do all kinds of things. But here we don't try and tap into that interest. Next. So this is the kind of, right at the structure, we have these enormous gaps. Then this is just introductory style. You have the typical teachers of various grades, etc. And the formal qualifications are good as across India now. Next. But if you look at the teachers are well qualified, but if you look at the training system, now only For class 9 and 10, it is systematic in AP. So there is some teacher training because you have an SCRT which heads the whole academic jingbang. But nothing for 11 and 12. And in Rajasthan, it's very sporadic. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. Now, if you look at human resource management, so in both states, as it happens, there are no para teachers, except in AP. Again, at the class 11 and 12, you have three kinds of teachers: regular, contract, and guest. So you can imagine this is a theme that many of us are familiar with, whatever side you are on this, but I'm just saying that this exists. Promotions are slow, though a little better in Rajasthan because of administrative reforms. Postings, AP has a unique, I mean, it is really to be lauded, a system of very transparent transfers, okay, of teachers. So it's kind of all displayed on a board, and then you go, you make your preferences. There are certain criteria that, you know, if you have a personal problem, you can do this. If you have been posted in a tribal area, you can come to an urban area, things like that. Very fair and transparent. But in Rajasthan, it's a free for all, and large camps are held where money is exchanged for teacher transfer. So this can tell you, you know, how, what is the kind of motivational structure that we put in place, what is the kind of structure that we have put in place to train our teachers in high schools and higher secondary. And in Rajasthan, if you are getting a posting by paying, obviously teaching well is not an issue at all. So, because, you know, it doesn't help you. You do it for your own personal satisfaction. Next. Then, of course, to blame myself, all in both states, the top posts are IAS officers who may or may not be interested in education. So you'll get all sorts. You'll get awful people like me, but you may get some better people. Acha. And there are then 4 other posts. In AP, there's a very unique thing. There is a separate education service. They have a education administrative service, which is, which means in theory that you can have educational administrators who really understand educational issues. Because the conundrum here is that if you post teachers to administrative posts, very often they are not comfortable in it. Okay, though it's a promotion and thing like that, but that is not their core skill. It is not something that they have practiced for many years. So sometimes some have a natural talent, some don't. So they will. But if you have, but if you put, as Rajasthan puts, if you put a general administrator like me, then we may not understand the specific issues of education. So what AP has done, and I think it's basically a good thing, that you have educational administrators who work in education, okay? But to match it, they don't have systematic training for them. And since there are very few, education administrative training courses, I mean, no one comes trained in educational administration. And if you don't train them, you don't have an institute, then they're really not all that different from a general administrator, except that they, over time, they get to know more about that subject area. And Rajasthan has this CMAT, which is an institute for training managers, educational managers, which they do. But if you look at that CMAT itself, there is no sort of criteria for posting. Anyone can be posted in the institute, okay? And then people are posted and they are given no orientation. So they also start whatever they think best. So this is the sort of kind of management structure that we have today for education. Next. Now, if you look at the field level, okay, in AP, what happens is that from class 1 to 10, you have a district education officer, which is well staffed. and you have a separate person for examination boards, and you have a separate person for open school. So at least you have something. But when you come to, but below the, as I said, below the district level, you only have a deputy education officer at the subdivision. As I said, AP has this very nice unit called the Mandal, where for elementary education, they have a Mandal education officer. And it's a good unit. I've seen they're able to connect to schools much more. But for secondary education, you don't have an outreach there. And even this person who is there at the subdivision level is promoted from a clerk. So it's a one-person office, and there is very little that is done. So even below, so there is no serious penetration below the district level, which is quite important, because that means for thousands of schools, there is, one person. So that is a kind of problematic thing. In in AP, you have a vocation officer who looks after government schools, okay? And you have a RIO, inspector officer, who's supposed to inspect private schools. And this person is merely the senior most headmaster or something, who may be in charge of 2 other schools. So you can imagine how much inspection of private schools that person does. In Rajasthan, at the district level, you have no personnel to conduct examinations in the district. Block level, you have a reasonably good staff strength. So again, when you look at the sort of human resources of managers, you see wide gaps in both states. Next. Then you look at academic. Yeah, here there is nothing but a gap. Okay, so as I said, there is no coherent institution who is supporting higher secondaries and secondary schools academically. Now, even if you said tomorrow, and in Rajasthan, they have at least in writing past orders that SCRT will also support higher secondary and secondary schools. You look at these institutions, there is no coherent, as Subir would know, policy for posting faculty there. Anyone can be posted. And mostly people will be posted because I want to stay in the district headquarters. And I have connections and I can. So this is the kind of academic this thing. Again, in SCRTs and diets, and Subir would, there are no experts in things like language learning, textbook formulation. So you formulate textbook, but you maths learning, or any of these things. So this so-called academic resource support itself has hardly any academic expertise. And again, faculty, as I said, are posted on patronage basis. I want to be in the state headquarters, I have connections, or I pay, or whatever, and I get a posting there. So this is your academic leadership. Then you come to the examination boards. Do you know that in both these states, they only recruit clerks who are then promoted to various posts? So the examination boards also have no academic backbone. So you are, sort of organizing examinations of class 10 and class 12, and you don't even have an academic person there. Of course, they make resource group, but the core is not, an examination board should have people who specialize in assessment. But you only have clerks, I think, because at one point before the computer age, they must have been needed for totaling and such like. So, and then if we say our examination system should improve, we should be very clear about which is the organization that we are asking that the examination system should improve and what its capacity is. So again, open school, ditto story, ad hoc postings. In AP, you put B.Ed teachers. In Rajasthan also, you collect random people and you post them. There is no person who's kind of, specializes in how do I access people in the children who have dropped out. What are their special needs? Nothing. So So you are running an open school for children who have dropped out, but you don't have any expertise in that particular school. Next. Then, if you look at community and vulnerable children, again, for vulnerable children, no specialists. What are the special problems faced by SCs, ST, the whole language issue, girls? We don't have anyone whose core area it is to address these issues or who understands. For differently abled children, because there is a Government of India scheme, there are resource persons there. And again, no experts for community communication and mobilization. Next. So if you look at the working style, uh, again, we are characterized by extreme centralization and hierarchy. I won't go into it too much because I'm running out of time, but basically, you get a lot of orders and you have to follow them, irrespective of the need on the ground. And what that does is that the person who's doing the thing, that disassociates that person from their work and the ground in this kind of hierarchy because they can't respond. They have to do what they are told. Now, given the kind of human resource situation that I have described, you don't have much analysis and strategy formulation. And this is how a lot of our reforms also take place. Because you're not capable of, you can't really say that learner levels are like this is because they're like this, and this is perhaps what we should be doing. You just don't have the manpower to do that. So if someone comes and says, okay, you start measuring, you measure every year and your learning levels will improve. You say, okay, yeah, let's do it. So that's why we also, there are these random, attempts. Okay, now let's do this, let's do that, and whoever is interested. And here what happens is then a lot of powerful people have a lot of sway, whether they are academically powerful or whether they are politically powerful or they are powerful administrator, they will decide that what should be done because you don't have a base which says this is what should be done. Next. Then again, there is a huge stress now on the use of technology. One good thing is that you have the kind of databases you never had, and AP has also administratively used technology well, medical cases, things like that, like they've done for postings. But there are also huge negatives in this. There are a lot of technical problems because we roll in technology without solving those. There is another thing that technology has done is it has increased centralization in government. Now, in almost any sector that I go and I study anything, people are attending digital meetings, okay? So this is true in every sector. And if you talk to people on the field, they do much less of their own work. They are constantly sitting in these digital meetings. So it has, in a system like this, it has actually made it worse. And another thing that technology is doing is, how much time do I have? 5 minutes. That it gives this impression of modernity, but that doesn't substitute for real research and analysis. Okay, they take a lot of tests and they keep feeding those scores in, but that doesn't help you in understanding why students are not learning and what should I do about that. So it gives this facade, but it doesn't really substitute for real thinking and real analysis. And then, of course, you have a lot of patronage and rent seeking, and I've already said what kind of this thing it has on the morale. Next. Okay, so what happens because of this kind of system? The first thing that happens is that you marginalize the core that is learning. Okay, so if you look at the curriculum and textbooks, mostly, except AP has some good textbooks, it is very unimaginative. It just follows the set kind of Government of India pattern. Academic resource persons will focus on administrative tasks. Like I asked one block resource person, supposed to be supporting teachers, What are your main job? I check enrollment. I check whether so and so benefit has been distributed. So you've sidelined that academic work. When I asked several people what is a good school, various kinds of people, teachers, they answer in terms of mainly infrastructure. It has a good building, or even if you ask what is a good teacher who comes on time. So, this is the kind of discourse that you have in the system. And if this is the discourse that you have in the system, and then, of course, we know over textbook how politics are prioritized over learning. And so we have we should not be surprised that we have poor learning outcomes because there is no academic discourse throughout our system. Okay, next. Then the scope for real work gets limited. One, your motivation has declined because you get rewarded based on patronage and seniority, not on the kind of work you do. Then shortage of manpower also means that you focus on the urgent tasks, not on the most important, which may be long range. So shortage of manpower means what I have to do immediately, I'll do and move on to the next day. And orders from the top, as I said, are more important than what is needed in the situation. So I may need to spend extra. For instance, in Rajasthan, the timetable is set from the state level. So even if the teacher wants to spend extra time on the, wants to vary, or the pace of learning is set from the state level that in this month you must do. So if the teacher sees that, these kids have not learned, I want to spend more time on this topic. No. So this is how these orders limit your capacity to do real work. Okay. Then, as I said, importance of the individual, because you don't have a kind of good analytic base where you have over the years understood issues, you have tried some solutions, looked at them, said this worked, this didn't work. So you don't have that. So anyone powerful comes and says, do this, you say yes. So that is, and then there are abrupt shifts. The one thing I forgot to add, that there is a kind of drifting policy. Okay, so sometimes you do this, sometimes you do that, because you're not thinking. Next, and then again, this is the last. So again, as I said, that all this short staffing and all, there is a huge dominance of, and between rent seeking and short staffing, there's a huge dominance of commercial interests. I'll take 2 minutes. I hope I'm not exceeding. That in AP, you have something called corporate schools. Okay, they are the most horrible thing that anyone has ever invented. They will take kids, and this is all over the state. Okay, not just a pocket like what is that place in Rajasthan, Kota. Not like that. This is across the state, AP and Telangana. So they'll take kids as young as 2.5 years old and take them through 12th with the most atrocious pedagogic practices, like humanities is ignored. Then because the whole thing is to get into engineering colleges, the syllabus for class 10 and 12 only is taught, and that is split across 9, 10, 11, 12. To kind of, and hundreds of things like that. Then there are students are graded A, B, C, D. So maximum attention is given to A because those are the guys who are likely to get in. D, C's and D's are called sponsor because they are paying, they're stupid enough to pay when they're never likely to get in. Something like 3 to 5% students actually get into IIT, and the whole AP is ambitious about, enrolling students in this. But you can't do a thing. One of the promoters of this corporate school company was a minister in the previous company. Okay, so and no one can touch them, and this goes on. And again, you have the inability to deal with vulnerable children. If you look at the schemes for vulnerable children, this is how institutions impact policy. They are all about, okay, so much scholarship to X, BC, so much uniform. Nothing talks about learning issues of vulnerable children, what social issues they may face, or things like that. So your policy is also very straight-jacketed because you don't have the capacity to think beyond it. And often you talk to teachers or administrators, they will talk of parents in terms of a problem. They don't help their children with schoolwork because they don't need, they're not trained to deal with children who come from such deprived backgrounds. So they see them as a problem, which further makes community relations with the school, it takes a further dip down. So that's the sort of scenario, and that's, I think, unless you bring very massive changes in that, you may not get very far. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for uncovering the supporting structures in education through a very nice comparative analysis of two states.